Hey, so I want to talk about my supernatural experiences in this video, and maybe we can reconcile them. Maybe you've had some experiences like that. Just talk about it. Um, all of them are of a clean and sober mind frame, except for the first one when I was 16. I was a kid. I'm in my 40s now. I don't partake in substances. I just that's where I am in my life. I don't as a young man, I was about experimentation with with drugs, and you know so I made mistakes, and that's what I did. Anyways, um, but there's some common ground there, and it even though it might subjectively be viewed as the first experience drug induced, there's a correlation there. That is interesting, especially with all of the supernatural experiences that I've experienced recently. And food for thought, just goes with all the other videos. You just try to, I don't think I'm anybody special, and I think anybody in a mindful nature can access um, this same stuff. So at about 16 years old, there was this could have been slightly older, it was right around that area of time. But at 16, I there was this substance called Salvia divinorum that had just come out to head shops, right? It was marketed as basically a legal hallucinogen that that the seeker could try. So they had this little paper at that point that they printed out and gave you so that you could read about it, and it told you kind of how to use it, So we talked about, medicine men and women and the shaman, how they used it to have these experiences, these visions, and these vision quest type things. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, wonder, what it is, right? What is this? And so I picked some up and went back and tried it. Now, when I tried it, I was in the upstairs of a house with a friend of mine and my brother. There's three of us there, and so we were smoking it, and there's a certain way to smoke it, and it was written in the instructions, right, with the introduction paper. So I smoked it, and there was an immediate sense of amnesia. The first thing that happened to me, and in fact, I said to my brother and my friend, or I just said out loud, they were there. I was like, what's going on? Where am I? Right. Now, I said that because what I was experiencing, like I said, I was upstairs in a house. It was like the roof of the house became transparent, and I was seeing things from below and above. I could see that it was a beautiful day out there. It was blue skies. I could see the trees and the whole neighborhood that we were in, from that perspective, right? I was like, okay. And then I was back at the same time. I was in my body, and I was looking at my friends, and they were like, oh, what do you see? Because they could tell that I was in a state, right? But they were kind of like background noise at that point, like wah 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 kind of thing, right? And what I saw is I saw two entities behind my brother and my friend. Now, these entities were very, very tall, big eyes, and looked like they were very, very tall, very skinny. And it's like they had little, I don't know, strings or light strings or something attached to my 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 buddy and my brother. And one of them looked at me, but it looked like it was looking through me, and it scared me at that point. I was like, if these things are behind them and they're not aware of it, right? What's behind me? So I was like, F that. And I was like, I'm getting out of here. I ran downstairs into the bathroom and looked in the mirror and to see what was behind me. By that point, I was back into the superficial reality. The experience was gone. It was it was scary, right? Like we can, superficially analyze it and be like, oh well, well, that was just a hallucination, right? It's just a hallucination. Okay, well, I can respect that, but I've had some experiences since then in the clean and sober mind frame that mimic that. And I haven't seen those entities again. I've never seen those entities again actually after that, right? I've seen them one time, right? They're very, very scary. I don't know if they were um, of positive or negative or aliens. I don't know. I don't know what that was. I don't know if it was a hallucination. All I just know is it was traumatizing. And it was scary to me. It was scary. The next experience I'm going to talk about is when I was at work in a remote location, and I had been reading the what they're called CIA documents or the military documents that about the United States working with the Monroe Institute to study occult teachings and see what they can pull out of it to make some sort of super soldier or something like that. I don't know exactly what they were working on. Anyways, this document talks about consciousness exploration. The Monroe Institute exists today, so you can go there, pay for classes. It's consciousness exploration is how it's marketed. Anyways, back to the experience. So I was reading these things and I was like, oh, well, I was like, that's interesting. They're using binaural beats, right? I'm gonna try this binaural beat thing, and so so I started doing that. Started practicing being mindful, letting go of the illusion of control, the fear construct, right? Dealing with the five inhibitions. Inhibitions is that I think I'm saying that wrong. There's the distractions, that stop you from meditating. So just being mindful and aware of that. And anyways, the experience. So I was meditating. I put a towel over my face to just kind of cover my eyes, just in case I needed to open my eyes. I just, you know what I mean? I could see darkness, and darkness would keep me more centered, instead of getting distracted and seeing, walls or just things that'll just wake up my analytical mind, right? I was trying to stay mindful and focused, right? Let go of everything and just listen and be in that reflective state. Well, what happened is I got pulled into an outer body experience. I wasn't trying to do it, it's just what happened. And so, but I wasn't expecting it. And that was very scary for me too. What I found myself is I found myself right outside of my body, looking at myself, seeing my hair all sprawled out on the pillow that I was laying on, and the towel on my face, covering my eyes, the washcloth, and I tried to move my hands, and I'm looking at myself, and I was like, man, I messed up. I was like, I'm here, okay, right? I was like, I don't know how to get back in my body. I was like, and I had all these racing thoughts at that point, and I was like, I was like, "I mean, I think I messed up here. I think I made a mistake." And and I tried to so hard to mumble these words, and I don't know how it came out, or if it did come out, but I was trying to say, "Help me," right? And then all of a sudden I was thrust back into my body, and I just asked myself, I was like, "What was that?" Okay, now that was the catalyst for me getting so involved in all the spiritual stuff and just digging into it, trying to reconcile the paradox, and just find the common ground between traditions and religions and just understand it. One of the first things when I came back here was I was like, "Hey, man, I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is of the positive or the negative, right? But if it's some sort of voodoo stuff or whatever, man, I don't want anything to it. No bad. I don't want to get involved in you know um, taking advantage of magic or whatever and using it for my benefit. I just don't, you know what I mean? I'm not about that. It's if it's subjectively evil or something, I need to figure out what this is. And so at a certain point with talking and communicating and praying and meditating about it, I found that I was like, hey, it's fine, and it's fine to continue, meditating. I wasn't doing any kind of chanting or trying to get myself possessed with anything. I was just listening, and so I mean, ultimately the experience was good if it's going to pull me into greater understanding, just being distracted with the experiential, superficial human experience. So, um, one of the next experiences that I was uh, I was on the island and I was meditating. I was in a deep state when something from it seemed like it was coming from the clouds, but it was like beyond the clouds, and I don't really have a word to describe that. It was not outside in the universe, but it wasn't inside either. It was like beyond, right? Beyond this reality. Anyways, it was a thunderous voice that said, "Hey, Will, what are you doing back here?" And then it kind of got darker, right? At this point, it was like, "Don't you know you don't like it here?" And then I was thrust into this state of great pain, like I was being torn apart or something. It was a terrible pain. And then there's a voice inside me. Maybe it was my conscience at that point. I don't know. It was something that it was like, Will, and that was coming from inside me. Um, It's like, what are you doing, man? You need to let go, right? You're doing this to yourself, right? Just stop and let go. It's like you can transmute all the suffering. And at that point, I let go of the I guess subconscious illusion of control, even though I didn't think I was trying to control anything. And everything changed. It shifted, and it was a positive experience. And then I got out of that state, and I was like, oh, that was nice and healing. And then I guess the most relevant, I thought there was four experiences, but um, I think I'm forgetting a couple. But this other experience, this other experience is kind of funny to me because I've been learning stuff about spirituality, and I was like, hey man, I was like, you got to walk the balance, sometimes you can't be in that reflective mind frame, like when you're driving a vehicle. And I'd always describe it to people as, you're going to end up driving off of the road if you try to be like, God, where should I be at? And you're just going to end off the ditch, right? So in that mind, you have to be in the superficial mind frame, and that's what I've been telling people. I was completely wrong on that because this next experience happened to me when I was driving. So I was down at the store and I had my dog with me, and he was sitting on the floorboard of the vehicle. And it was really hot out that day. And he's a puppy, and he was panting, and he was hot, and I could see. I looked at his in his eyes, and I could see that he was suffering, but he was just trying to be a good boy. He was trained to sit on the floor, right? And so he wouldn't get up on the seat, even though I tried to get him up on the seat to get some fresh air out the window, and he just wouldn't do it. And so I was petting him, and I turned the air conditioning on the floor, right? And I didn't want him to suffer. And I was pulled into another 4D experience where this one was crazy because I was driving a vehicle, but I was pulled into the dog's mind, and I was looking in the dog's mind back at myself from his perspective. Now, analytically, there wasn't going much going on in his mind. There just wasn't much thinking going on. Maybe because he was a puppy or he's still learning, he's just trying to be a good boy. But man, that unconditional love that I felt from that perspective was amazing. So there's a, and then I also saw the satellite view again. Um, the vehicle was the roof was transparent, and I could see from up top looking down at myself and looking at me, looking at the dog, back, and just, yeah, it was so you got a few different perspectives there. You got me driving the vehicle, right? So there's my attention over there. You have me looking at the dog, and then me looking at me from the dog's perspective, right? And me seeing all that, and then the viewpoint up here, right, where you can see everything else. And another 4D experience. It was wild all while driving a vehicle. Um, and there's been other experiences. It's that's why I talk about in some of these other videos about staying in the reflective state. Because stay in the reflective state. I mean, I mean, clearly you can drive a vehicle and being in the reflective state. You can wash your car. You can do all kinds of mindless tasks, as long as your mind's not superficially distracted. In fact, for practicing meditation, that might be the best thing to do is just, live in the moment, do the thing, but, do a task that's, you don't really have to think about. Carrying firewood might be it, walking. Um, Anything, chopping firewood, just fairly mindless. And but doing a mindless task mindfully, but not mindful of the superficial nature of it. So, and in this reflective state, I've learned some stuff. I think I've talked about this in another video where I said, I think I was brushing my teeth at this point or something like that. And it was told to me, why go searching in the darkness when you're a being of light? Well, what do you expect to find? I'm just giving you fair warning, brother. You know, you don't have to listen to me. You can do whatever you want, right? But again, I don't know what you're expecting to find. Just be aware. Good luck, you know. And that kind of got me thinking because I wanted to go to the Monroe Institute, totally willing to pay for it. Doesn't matter. It's just money, you know. And but I got thinking about it and I was like, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I seem to be having these experiences because I'm practicing that behavior. Um, I've found some deep insight in the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Sermon on the Mount. Um, you know, all I'd say to you is just look into it. I don't want to turn this into dogma and preach to you. I'm just from what I've seen and what I've experienced. Um, that's a good starting point to just tune your mind, body, and soul, and then go seeking and just listen. You'll find out what it is. You know, if you listen to me and I just tell you and I preach to you and say, hey, it says here in the book. I mean, that's just analytical, right? And the analytical mind can be such a distraction, you know. So I think that's I think that's important to recognize. You know, you can fill your head with all this stuff, all this information, you know, but I mean, when are you actually listening? You can't listen if you're thinking, you know. So anyways, hopefully this video wasn't too long and boring, but that's it. You know, that's some of my supernatural. I'm sure I'm forgetting some of them. I've had a lot of them. Those are more of the substantial ones that I wanted to share with all of you. So I would love to have a dynamic conversation because you know going back and forth with all of you is it helps me remember in the human experience because when I'm just talking to a camera, yeah, it's more difficult and I tend to forget things and you know just going back and forth it's way better. Yeah. So the way that you could help me with that is you could subscribe because YouTube won't let me do any live videos and converse with anybody, just random people that click on lives if I don't have 50 subscribers. So, but mm, it doesn't matter. The comments work really well too, and Reddit. I jumped on Reddit as well, and there's some pretty good insight. Um, Not all the time. I mean, you can get trolls, but I mean, you can get trolls anywhere, right? So, and it is what it is. It's just part of it. You know, you'll have this and you'll have this. You know, so main thing is you know turn the other cheek or don't feed into it. You know, don't feed the entity. You know, empower yourself. And I think that's what the teachings that I was just talking about really kind of teach you, right? Is to empower yourself with that. You know, there's a lot to it, you know, and at a certain point, you know, and it's a paradox, right? Because you empower yourself with surrender, you know. Interesting, huh? I know the video is long. If you stayed, I appreciate it. Hey, much love to you guys. Take care.